Welcome to the People Productivity Channel, a place where you can become a better you. In fact, in this world, you are the product, and a better you is actually oftentimes a solution. In that vein, today I have a very interesting guest on, Kathy Caprino. I think you're going to love it. Kathy actually is one of those individuals who's got over 900,000 followers. She's an influencer on LinkedIn, very hard to do, actually. And, when somebody gets to that level and they have that many people willing to follow them, they're adding a lot of value in a lot of lives. So Kathy has touched many lives. She gives great advice. I think you're going to really enjoy this particular interview. So please stay tuned. I think this is one you're going to sit tight for and really listen into.
Thank
And
you,
I
Frank.
think, yeah, listen, no one, thank you. Thank you for coming on.
My
No
pleasure.
one introduces themselves better than themselves. So, Kathy,
Well,
you
that's an
could share a
interesting
little bit
point
about
that I want
yourself.
to talk about in a minute, but because sometimes some people are humble and don't do it so well. But what do we need to know? So I am a career coach, leadership coach, executive coach, trainer, speaker. I'm a senior Forbes contributor, which I adore. And
Mm-hmm.
I write on Thrive Global. And as we said, LinkedIn is my happy place. I love it. And I am the founder of Kathy Caprino LLC. And it's all about helping professionals. And truthfully, my
Mm-hmm.
sweet spot is women, but I think everything we're going to talk about today, will resonate with men as well. But it's helping professionals thrive. So my whole world is, here's a tagline: dig deep, discover your right work, and illuminate the world with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm going.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's that story.
Fascinating. So many people in the world are suffering, and so many people haven't really been able to even find who they are. Our educational system, which should produce adults who discover along the pathway who they
Right.
are coming out with no idea who they are. So finding brave as a concept is just really, really interesting. And, as I look at the world and things, I often wonder, I see people like you who've really built up a following and shared so many great messages. What inspired you to find, brave and help others find it inside themselves?
Thank you, Frank. I'll try to make this brief, but there's a story there. I did have an 18-year corporate career, and I was one of those people that you mentioned.
Hmm.
And I really have kind of tracked the trajectory of why we get lost and why we wake up often in midlife and say, "What have I done here?" But for me, I was a writer in college. I was an English major. I fantasized about being in publishing, and from the second I got out of college, I took a 6-week course at NYU publishing, and then I bailed on being,
Oh, you bailed on it?
I stayed in publishing, but I took the first job that was given to me, and that was marketing in science publishing. And what happens to many of us is if you're good at something and you want to succeed and you're young, you continue to pursue that track, whether it's really who you are and what you care about. That's not the questions we ask ourselves usually.
Yes.
We're just like, let's succeed. I'm good at this. Okay. So 18 years I had a corporate career, and on the outside it was successful. I made a lot of money, global initiatives, vice president, but on the inside it wasn't successful. And then when I hit 40, and I am 59 now,
Hmm.
those bumps turned into literal full-blown crises. I faced like everything you hear about, but you don't think it'll ever happen to you: sexual harassment, gender discrimination,
Yeah.
narcissistic bosses,
Mm.
toxic, all your world,
Yeah.
toxic colleagues, chronic illness. I was very ill with an infection of the trachea for every 3 months for 4 years,
Ooh,
and zero work-life balance. My kids were little, and I was not in the fabric of it. Was a mess.
sure. Talk about
But
misery.
why many mid-career professionals don't move forward is when you've invested, all those years in building success, you don't know what else you would do, and you don't want to risk everything.
Yeah.
So I did see a therapist and a career counselor around that time, and the career counselor, $1,000 assessment tests, and he comes out and says, "Well, it looks like you're in the right field." And I said, "Oh no." And that was the quickest
What a
waste of it.
great test that was, obviously.
So glad I
That's a
spent that
that's a great
$1,000.
instrument, huh? It really worked.
And so I did nothing. And what happened
Hmm.
was I was promised at my company, you have a big career here, buy a big house, so we moved to a more affluent area. And 1 month later was 9/11, and a month later I lost my job.
My God.
And it was so devastating to me, all that I'd been through, that I really had a breakdown moment.
Hmm.
And I said to myself, I can't return to that life. I can't do it. So I'm in here's the breakthrough experience. I'm in my therapist's office crying a week
Yep.
after. And he said, listen, I know from where you sit, this is the worst crisis you've ever faced. But from where I sit, it's the first moment you can choose who you want to be. Who do you want to be?
I love it.
Oh, and I said, I want to help people, not hurt people and be hurt. So, long story short, from that conversation, I became a marriage and family therapist. But that wasn't the ultimate
Hmm.
destination. I started realizing that career coaching, and particularly women who had so many challenges that I had had, and I realized I wasn't alone. So that's 15 years ago. And so I've been focused on this career coaching. And, to me, what we do for a living is so revealing about who we want to be. And
Hmm.
so that's the way. It's almost like career therapy, truthfully. But so that's how I help. And the Finding Brave piece came a few years ago when I said, if I pull the viewfinder back after working with about 15,000 people, what is it that they're missing?
Hmm.
What are they coming for help for? And what am I helping them get? And it was bravery and power,
Hmm.
those two things. And so I've been focused on, with the Finding Brave podcast and the new book coming out in July, how do we become braver? What does that do for us? And what is power? Why do we shun it? Many women shun power
Hmm.
because they're afraid it's abusive. And why do we need it? And how do we get it? And how does that change our lives? So there's that story.
So, I mean, that's a really, really interesting journey. And, a lot of times it's those very difficult moments where, you face life and make real decisions that affect the rest of your life. So,
That's it.
it's fascinating the road you went down and the journey you went down. And there's just so many people who are, they're stuck and they're not really brave enough to move on. It is scary to move on, right?
It is.
Especially years into a career, you've got a certain lifestyle, you need a certain level of income. It's very hard
Right.
to start over. And I
And can
think
I
people
can
get
I
stuck.
highlight something, Frank, that you
Yeah.
said? Our education today, you've talked about it. Education systems are, what we need in the industrial revolution. Right now, it's
Yep.
not helping us. What I find over and over and over again is people have not been trained to actually understand, what are my talents, what are my gifts, what do I
Yes.
care about supporting. It's not enough that you like finance. You also, if you're a finance director, you want to be in an organization that you love their outcomes, that you're proud of it.
Yes, for
Otherwise,
sure.
it's going to feel like a job, and a miserable one. So, but to your point earlier in our podcast chat, we're not trained to identify, how am I great? What are
Mhm.
my special talents? And what are the talents that I love to use versus those skills that I have but I don't want to use because they're boring or, uninspiring.
Sure.
So the very first piece is figuring out how you're special. And people can't do it, Frank. You wouldn't believe how many people can't answer the question. How are
I
you
totally
special?
agree with you. I don't think, I think they've barely thought about it. They're going down a road, maybe they're afraid to think about it, but,
Yeah.
if kids were just allowed to gravitate towards what they like at a young age and then given more of that, along with all the traditional stuff they need to learn the math and the English and the other things. But, by the time they get to high school, they should be doing half of what they're inspired by.
I agree
And
with
there would
you.
be, the world would be so much different. You wouldn't have all these people trapped in things that they hate, that they pursued because maybe it pays well. I don't know how many people I've talked to who went into accounting and are just like, oh my God, please, I just can't handle any more numbers. They become
Like a
really
cog in a wheel that doesn't
cog in a
end.
wheel. Yeah. And, there are people who love the numbers. I'm not saying anything
No,
bad about it, but
no,
these are people who chose it for money, not
I
because they
know.
love numbers. And that shouldn't be happening. The people who love numbers should be just doing the accounting, and the people who have other special skills should be doing something else. So, we look at this area, you talk about people seeking power, and you study this. This is an important area of self growth, I think. What maybe we could discuss this a little bit. And what can people do then to understand their special talents? What do they need to do?
Yeah. So I call this the first kind of step in the whole finding brave process, and I
Mhm.
call it brave sight. So I do have a free assessment called the Career Path Assessment, which is 11 pages of questions I wish someone had asked me 30 years
11
ago.
pages. Wow, everybody should go to your site and find this.
And I can give you that link. You can share
Yes.
that with everyone. But it's asking people, and whether you take this assessment or do it yourself this weekend, you really sit down and think, what is every job I've ever had? What did I love about it? What did I hate about it?
Mhm.
What were the biggest achievements? What were the struggles and failures? What do I want to bring forward? And it asks a lot of questions like, what are your standards of integrity? What are your values? What are your non negotiables? But the interesting thing is, when I say, what are you great at? Literally 75 to 80% leave it blank or say, I'm not sure. And part of that is we are, particularly women, are afraid to say we're great at anything because what if someone says we're not? So part of this is tune out the noise,
Mhm.
tune out what your parents said. I've had clients that the parents said, I know you want to be a lawyer, but only smart people can be lawyers. They've actually told their
Can you
child that they're
imagine?
stupid.
Can you
You got to
imagine?
tune it out and you have to really listen. But one thing I want you to do is, think about, let's say you're 40 and you struggled in some jobs, but you've had some success, even jobs you've been laid off at. Think about what you were uniquely gifted at. Like the last VP job that I was
Yeah.
laid off from, it was devastating to be kind of kicked to the curb, and it took me literally years to heal that. But when I looked at what I was great at, there were some things like I turned around fading businesses. I brought in new clients because I could listen to what the client wanted and mediate that with our marketing team. Whereas before me, it was just constant struggle. So I came up with a list of what did I do there that maybe someone else wouldn't have done in the way I did. So I want you to tune out all the noise, tune out the pain of being laid off. It's all for your greatest good. Whatever's happened, you can
Yep.
use it. But try to understand, how am I different? And don't worry about, but if I say I'm great, someone's going to say I'm not. Understand how you're great.
Yeah. Trust yourself.
Trust yourself.
Yeah.
And if you can't do it, ask other people. As we know, I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. Ask for recommendations, give recommendations, find 10 people, remember 10 people who you adore, and give them a recommendation, a written one, not just the endorsement of the skill, but also ask people. I can tell you that some of the recommendations I've gotten there have literally healed me, because in tough jobs, I thought I was a terrible manager, a terrible leader. And here's someone who says, you were a role model and a shining light. I'm like, oh, I wasn't so terrible in that
Yeah.
toxic place. So ask for recommendations and ask people, how do you think I stand out?
Yeah. Without without a doubt, getting that kind of feedback.
Yeah.
Because people do see stuff. That famous was Harrow's window, right? Where, here's the things that I know about myself that no one else knows.
Oh,
Here's stuff that other people know about me that I don't know.
there you go.
Here's stuff that we both know. And then there's this last window, which is stuff no one knows, including yourself. Like maybe you're a great concert pianist, but you never actually picked up music.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. This guy Harrow
I have
came
to
up
think about
with
that.
windows, Harrow's window. And I think it's an interesting way to look at it
I
because
love that.
there are things people are great at that others can tell them. And there are things they know no one knows. And certainly I've always found that, people and learn to think but not to feel, so they don't really ever feel what their body's telling them.
Mm,
They can eat food and be low energy for a while and not really feel it, and the body's telling them to cut it out, or doing something and they're unhappy and people poo poo that.
you're so
It's a
right.
trouble light. Happiness is a trouble light in your life, or the other, either way, depending how it's working. So
I learned as a therapist, I learned a lot of things as a therapist. What a life changing experience. But
yeah.
your body says what your lips cannot.
Yeah, that's great.
Isn't that a good
Yeah.
phrase? Meaning, listen to your body. Listen to your body. It's telling you things, and if you're not listening, it's only going to get louder, and that can turn into a medical crisis like mine. I did want to point out something, highlight what you just said, Frank. One reason we don't know what our talents are is because they come so easily to us. We don't imagine them as talents. Like, I was a
Mhm.
singer and I
Great
loved
point.
to be on stage. And other people would say, isn't that number two on the most stressful thing in the world after losing a spouse? I mean,
Yeah,
people say, I don't know how you could stand up in front of 1,000 people. It's a happy place for me. But when it comes so easily to you, you don't see it as a gift. But it is. It is. Another way to think of this is, for instance, you are a CIO, or you turned around
yes.
IT organizations. If I were hired to do that, Frank, I think I would last about 20 minutes and then I would be fired. I can turn cultures around, but in
Yeah,
particular the IT world and what.
yeah.
So think about what you can do that someone else would really fail at. That's another way. These are a lot of different ways for you to understand how really amazing you are.
I tell you what, people should take that 11-page thought-provoking assessment that you have for free on your site and do it.
Do
There's
it.
no reason they shouldn't be introspective. There could be nothing more important in life than knowing what you're good at. It makes things easy. It
That's it.
does.
And it makes you
Otherwise,
love yourself a little more, and we need that.
and be fulfilled and, go bat 400. Why not? What's wrong with it? Nothing wrong with that at all. You come up with a lot of interesting things that, people who are struggling on finding themselves and doing better on the job can actually do. And one of them you point out is communicating from fear versus strength. Why don't we talk about that a minute?
Yeah. So, what you're referring to are what I call the seven damaging power gaps that
Yeah.
professionals face. So, there's the gap, and then there's the flip side, finding brave. And in this case, we're talking about brave speak. But the flip side of it, the gap is communicating from fear.
Mhm.
So, wow. This is something I see every day with women, but I see it in my male clients too. I really do believe that communication skill is one of the most vital skills we need
Mhm.
to succeed and to thrive and to be heard and to be respected. It goes along with boundaries, what you'll allow, what you'll tolerate. But when we communicate from fear, and any women listening, see if you can resonate, and men too. Do you say what needs to be said, but in a way that paves the way for people to hear you? So I want to give an example here. Women have typically been trained not to be assertive, not to be confident, not to be powerful because,
Mhm.
and I don't mean to bash men, it's not about that, but we do live in a patriarchal world.
Yeah.
So women have been taught be a little more pleasing, a little more accommodating. So I want every woman listening to start, and men to start evaluating how you say the hard things. A lot of people, someone just today who I met with said, I want to be more selfish and demanding so that I can get what I want. No, you don't want to be selfish and you don't
No.
want to be demanding. But
Please.
we often don't know how to be forceful in a way that isn't going to leave body parts.
Yeah.
So for me, I grew up not being able to speak up to my authority figures for a lot of reasons. So when I became an executive, I could do it, but I would leave body parts. I was rough. One of my bosses called me a buzz saw.
Mm.
So I spoke up, but there wasn't really strength there. There wasn't really confidence. There was just a harshness because I didn't
Mhm.
know how to do it. And being tough was scary to me. This is what I mean by communicating from fear. What we need to do is start looking at the way we speak. Are we building bridges or are we leaving body parts? And one tip I want to leave people with, I
Mhm.
interviewed two guys. They're called the behavioral science guys,
Mhm.
Joseph Maxfield and no, David Maxfield and Joseph Grenny. And
Mhm.
they recorded a female actor and a male actor saying the exact same forceful thing. They were in a meeting two separate videos,
Yeah.
and they said, I don't agree with the direction that the team is going in. Well, when people watched the woman, her perceived competency and her perceived value, what she should be paid, dropped precipitously.
How
Now,
interesting.
what yeah, the man's did as well. So apparently we don't like forceful people at all, but
Yeah.
for the woman, she was penalized. And what they tested were different ways you can say a forceful thing but mitigate the backlash. And what they came up with was if you say a value statement before. So for instance, if I'm sitting on your
Mhm.
board, Frank, People Productive, and I want to say, Frank, I have to share with you, I'm not on board here with where the direction you're going. You could put a value statement in front of it and say something like, I have to share, I really value transparency and honesty. So I need to share here that I'm not on board here. And here's why. And there was
Mhm.
something about sharing the value statement that helps people, it softens the blow and helps people
Yeah.
understand why you are being assertive in this way. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Oh, I think that's 100% on the money. People are always trying to read intent, and when the intent's not clear,
I love that.
then
Right.
I really do think that I think they worry about it, right? We don't know what your intention
Yeah,
is,
like what?
human, right?
Right.
So, hey, maybe your plan is you're gonna hurt me, quote unquote. This is the
Right.
way the human brain is wired. So it's constantly looking for threats.
Hmm.
And I think you eliminate the threat by putting the value statement in front of it. That would be my quick take on that.
Love that. Love that. But that is just one of many examples of how we need to start looking at how we speak everywhere
Yes.
and finding a way not to be selfish and demanding. That isn't going to work, but to be clear, to be confident, not to hide and say what needs to be said. That's
Yeah.
what we have to do.
And, it could be as simple as, there's a reason you're not on board too, so,
Right.
look, we're trying to accomplish X. And
Mm,
based on my experience, I think what's being recommended will produce Y. So,
love it.
it's
You know,
just a nice
excuse
way
me.
of saying I'm not on board, but
And I remember when I was doing market research in the book club world, we hired a woman named Ann Dobbs to be the focus group moderator. And she would say, every here are 10 people in the focus group. Here's the ground rule. Every idea has value. No one is allowed to cut down another person's idea.
good.
But if you want to build on it, say something like, interesting, Frank, I'd like to build on that idea.
Mhm.
And then you don't feel slapped down. You feel like, my idea brought the conversation forward. There's another idea.
Yeah, yeah. No, which is great. So let's talk about more ideas and things that people could do to feel better about themselves and more fulfilled at work. One of which is asking for what you deserve.
Oh,
I think this is a very hard thing to do,
so
right? I
hard.
mean, in
So
some
hard.
ways, God, we're all taught not to be greedy and to be caring and giving, and not all of
That's
us,
right.
but many of us. So, what do
That's
you
right.
encounter here? Because that's a
What I see over and over is number one, while we have this hunch that we're valuable, people don't understand how to articulate that or measure that. So, number one, they don't know how to assess their value. Number two, they're afraid to assess it and state it. Number three, they don't know how to ask. So if we're talking about a promotion or a raise or a plum assignment, so many people shy away and sit in a boring job where in fact they could change it. They could go and ask their boss or I would ask your boss permission. Hey, listen, over there they're doing something that's so interesting. Would you be okay with me, contributing a little to this very cool initiative or spearheading this? We just sit in quiet desperation in our boredom. We're afraid, and so many people are afraid to ask for more, whether that's money or time or flexibility. And we have to get over that fear to ask for what we deserve. We have to assess what it is. Like, let's say it's salary. It's not some number you should just make up in your head. It's a number you should research.
I
You
agree
know,
with you.
right? Let's hear what you think about this, Frank, because I'm sure you help people do this day in and day out too. But you need to understand your value, vet it, understand what you could get in the marketplace. Another way to understand your value is interview. I don't care how happy you are in your job.
Yeah.
Throw yourself into the marketplace and interview and see what offers you get, because often that'll make you come back and go, holy cow, maybe I have it better here than I thought, but I still want this. I still want more flexibility or more exciting whatever assignment. What do you think?
Well, I think that's a great idea because you can't just go ask for money. You should understand what you're worth. You have to. I mean, in fact, this is why companies do so much research
Right.
into pay scales because they want to pay somebody a fair rate, but they don't want to overpay for a
Right.
particular job. Now,
Mhm.
they may do a bad job, they may be behind in terms of where pay is, but boy, you've got to have some facts that say, look, I get calls, all the time from recruiters, and it appears they're willing to pay this in the market. I think we got to catch up here.
I love it.
You know,
And I talk about build a case, not an emotional case. I deserve a promotion, a case with facts about what you've contributed and how that's moved the needle. And if you're going for a promotion, you also need to think about how is this going to affect the ecosystem? Why is this a good thing for the organization, not just for me? You've got to really not do this emotionally, but build a strong case and present it.
you do. And if you want to work on a level playing field, other people are doing this, and they're good at making their case. And we do know humans will avoid conflict and try to satisfy it. So if somebody's coming in who builds a good case and you don't, you're going to get left behind.
That's it.
That's just the way life works.
Do you know
So,
there's one study that showed that out of the NBA program into their first job, 57% of men negotiated their first salary and 7% of women.
no, no,
So, to your point, if you're not doing it, you're falling behind.
you
And
won't.
it might take you years and years and years, if ever, to catch up, you know?
Yeah. You're entitled to be paid really a very good market wage. And if you're really good at your job, you should be paid at the top of the market.
Right.
And you shouldn't feel at all bad about it. You deserve it. You're entitled to it. Look, I mean, people can argue about, why teachers make X and actors make Y. I mean, you could have a lot of arguments about it. The reality is, look, that's the world. And if you're in a job and the top of the pay scale is 1.5 times what you're getting, you're entitled to it.
Right.
If you're good enough, you are. And
That's it.
we don't create the pay scales in the world. We just live in them. So the reality is, yeah, I think people should absolutely go out and try to understand what a fair price is for what they do.
And when you bring it up to your boss and you're going to ask at the right time and present it at the right place, if they say no, then you need to say, can we create a development plan so that I understand what's required here for me to get to what I believe is the right level of
Yes.
compensation. And if they won't do that, then it's probably time to think about moving
Yeah.
on.
I think that conversation, I mean, I love that you give people this advice because this tells you a lot about what you need to know.
Right.
Really, it tells you what they think of you. Many times leaders have really no idea how good you may be at something because they're not in that. Like, take any
True.
one of these professions. You get a CEO, and there's this incredible marketing guy or gal, and they never did marketing. They don't
Right.
know exactly what it takes. It's hard for them to evaluate stuff. It's always hard to get good numbers. Same with IT. So the reality is they
That's true.
oftentimes don't know. Matter of fact, many times I find people believe kind of what you tell them, you know, because
That can work to your benefit, right? You can tell them how, you
as
know,
long as you're producing, I mean,
that's it.
be I think they should always be humble. I was always humble. I think people should be humble, but you should be treated fairly too.
Yeah, and there's a difference between being a, dish rag and being humble.
That's
I,
right.
you know, I I'm not a fan of humility in terms of women are too humble often.
Mhm.
But I think I love humility in that I'm always a student, I'm always learning, I can always grow. But that doesn't mean you're going to get walked over and taken advantage of. That's not what we need by humility, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I like humble in the sense that, you're not running around telling people you're good. They
Yeah,
know whether you're good or not.
right.
Let's
And
face it,
if
right?
you have to say it,
You're
something's
not.
missing here.
You're not. So you
Yeah,
should be able to go in, and if, you're doing a great job and somehow they're not seeing it, then the development plan is a great idea
right.
because you'll find out where they think the gaps are, and you might just find out that maybe the grass is greener.
Yeah, that's it.
It's
I
not a
love it.
bad thing. Hey,
No.
let's talk about some of these other things that, people should do and they're afraid to do, like to engage influential people because
Oh,
maybe they think
wow.
they're not good enough to engage them. What do you see?
I want to give an example. I just heard from somebody yesterday who said, I'm thinking of working with you as a coach, but I really want to find recruiters who are going to help me get a better job. Well, here's the deal.
Mm,
I love recruiters, but recruiters and applying online only get you about 15% of the jobs that are
that
out
is
there.
correct.
85% is through networking. And I didn't realize this when I was in corporate life. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have sponsors. I didn't even know what those were.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was a long time ago. But what I find with so many people who are unhappy in their careers is that they're very isolated. They don't have a mentor to talk to. They don't have a sponsor. And for those of you who wonder what the difference is, in my view, a sponsor is very much like a mentor who can be in the fabric of your life and give you
Yep.
advice and guidance. But a sponsor has power, has clout, has influence, so they can open doors for you when you're not even in the room.
Mhm.
And the research shows that men more naturally get sponsors. They see who's powerful and they naturally gravitate. Women tend to have more mentors. Well, you need both, but what you do need to do is get out of your vacuum. We cannot do what we want alone and in a vacuum and on an island. We can only build a thrilling career when we have help. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but go to industry association meetings, go to conferences. So in person, you want to meet with new people, but you also want to connect online. Anything anyone is doing, someone's doing it 10 steps ahead of you in a way that inspires you.
Mhm.
And so, on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, follow them, share their stuff, curate great content, share it on LinkedIn. It's time to now engage with other people. You need support to
Mhm.
have the career that you dream of. Otherwise, you're really going to struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a much harder world if you're out carving the path through the jungle
Oh,
on your own.
so hard and no need.
No need.
People are already doing amazing things
Yeah.
that you can learn from and be inspired by,
I
right?
agree with you. The old quote of, standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, that's true.
That is true.
It really is. I mean, we're all standing on other people's shoulders whether we realize it or not, right? Because
Yeah.
been given so many things that other people have created. It really is an amazing time. So then the
Yeah.
other thing is, the ability to push back at the right time,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And people
That's
are
it.
oftentimes afraid, and this is more fear coming in, but I assume you see this often, huh?
Yeah. And when you say pushback, you mean my power gap of acquiescing instead
Yeah.
of saying stop to mistreat me.
Correct. Correct.
So, what I'm talking about there is, and it's a touchy subject for a lot of people. Every time I give a talk, I'll say to people, whether it's 200 people, 1,000 people, how many of you have seen some behavior at work, whether it's gender bias, sexual harassment, cruelty, toxicity, that you left feeling incredibly uncomfortable about? And you thought that night, what do I do about it?
Mhm.
Every single hand goes up, Frank. Every single hand.
Mhm.
So, what I'm talking about there, and of course, we're in a time of Me Too where women are speaking up more, but really, men have been mistreated in many ways. I've heard from so many men who've been passed over or kicked out, or we've all been mistreated.
Oh,
I
it
mean,
happens.
is there a person who's worked for any amount of time who hasn't been on the receiving end of something that's wrong, unfair? I don't think so. So the idea here is all about building your power and bravery. What are you going to do about it? When you see any kind of mistreatment, whether to yourself or to people in front of you, are you going to acquiesce, meaning do nothing? Or are you going to stand up? Are you going to stand up with the power that you have or to get more power? So, in the book that's coming out, The Most Powerful You, I am talking about women dealing with gender bias and
Yeah.
mistreatment. And there are lots of ways we can handle it. And when you are on the receiving end of mistreatment, you feel very alone, and it's very crazy making. I mean, I've been sexually harassed. I think, they say most women in their lifetime have. When it's happening, you doubt yourself and you think, is this what I think it is? And did I do anything to bring this on? It's
Yeah.
very confusing. And that's why you need help. You need to go see an employment lawyer. And I don't mean to sue, I mean understand from an expert who deals with helping employees understand what you're dealing with, and the best ways to move forward. The other thing, I'd love your thoughts on this, Frank. I love HR people. A lot of them are my clients, but HR isn't necessarily your friend.
Well, they're doing risk management on behalf of the enterprise, so
There you go. That's it.
they are.
So, how many times have we gone to HR or gone to our boss and actually it was the wrong thing to do?
Mhm.
Um, I've had it. I went and complained about one boss, and the president and the head of HR were there, and they said, "We see what you're saying. We support you." And they said, "Go have a talk with your boss directly." I did. He was a narcissist. You don't take on your narcissistic boss. And would
Yeah.
you believe that that current president was pushed out? And
Mhm.
this boss who I complained about became the president.
There
Well,
you
it
go.
did not go very well for me.
No.
So you don't just race in without understanding your ecosystem. Who is safe here? Who should I talk to? How do I get support? But the idea is don't acquiesce and just look at mistreatment in front of you and not do anything.
Mhm.
It's a tough question, but it's
It's a
important
very,
to do.
very hard question because the outcome is just gonna be different depending on the people, the circumstances, the power structure, who's
Right.
got it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we seen people steamroll other people time and again, yet move up and leaving a wake a mile wide behind them,
That's it.
destroying the fabric out of the company under them, but, kissing up so well and talking up such a great game that, they're
And
liked.
often, you and I've talked about this, often they are producers. They bring in money.
Yes.
And a lot of companies don't even consciously want to admit that this is such a destructive force because they're high producers.
Yeah.
But I know, as you're a turnaround expert and people productive expert, you cannot let these toxic people remain.
Oh, they destroy
So
the fabric of the culture.
they do.
They just rip threads out. Some of the best threads get torn out of the fabric. The fabric becomes loose. And, then it obviously can't carry the weight it needs to.
So this power gap is also for every leader and every manager who's listening. I know you've liked some of my posts. I think one was 6 behaviors. If you're engaging in these, you shouldn't be a manager. And
Mhm.
I am dead serious. And you can share that link on
Yeah, yeah,
in
I
your
will.
show notes. But you see it. This is what you've seen over and over. Toxic cultures are sustained
Yeah,
by,
they are. And,
yeah,
a lot of this toxicity in the workplace and people's fear and their lack of self-awareness means they're gonna have a lot of unfulfilled dreams, right? At the end
that's
of the
it.
day.
I mean, why am I spent wasting any kind of breath talking about all of this? Because these gaps are what keep us from thriving. And my way in to intervene in happiness is through careers, because most of us work more than we do anything else. I
Mhm.
mean, I have grown children now, and thank goodness I got laid off right as they were 7 and 4. And thank goodness, because I could then be in the fabric of my children's lives, which is really what I
It was a
wanted.
gift.
But it was a gift. But I'm pretty sure one of my clients today said she's weighing 2 options: one incredibly exciting but very risky, and one that was more stable but less thrilling. And she said, "Do I really need all this thrill? Do I need to be thrilled in my job?" And I would say, look, I can't answer that for you, but I think when you get to the end of your life, 90 looking back, you are going to want to ask the question, did I do and contribute and give what I knew I was capable of doing
Yeah.
in a thrilling way?
One of those great regrets at the end of life. I wish I'd taken a little more risk.
That's
So
it,
many
right?
things people wanted to do, and they get to the end, they can't do them anymore, and they say, "Why didn't I do it?"
Why didn't I do this?
Yeah. It's probably
Yeah,
one of the few, you find out that people, they didn't love enough, they didn't take enough risk and do exciting things, right? And,
that's it.
you
I
know,
didn't fulfill the potential that I knew was inside. That is a painful regret.
yes.
Very painful.
Yeah. And these are ones that you wrote an article on that, actually.
Yeah.
And
Well, I interviewed Bronnie Ware, who wrote one article on the 5 regrets of the dying because she was in palliative care for years. And this is what she heard over and over.
mm,
And I interviewed her, and she's so beautiful. And then she wrote a best selling memoir on it, on
uh,
how those regrets changed her life because she started to live differently. But what it did make me do is look at what are the regrets that career people have, midlife career.
mhm.
And I want to read those. Can I?
Yeah, yeah, please go ahead.
The first is I wish I hadn't listened to other people about what I should study and pursue. Number two, I wish I hadn't worked so hard and missed so much. Number three, I wish I hadn't let my fears stop me from making change.
Hmm.
Number four, I wish I'd learned how to address toxic situations in people. And number five, I wish I hadn't let myself become so trapped around money.
Yeah, it is. I mean, all of those things are true. I mean, people are trapped in different ways in their lives. And then, they get to their mid 40s or whatever and say, my God, what am I going to do?
Right.
You
I
know?
remember my sweet dad who's in heaven. He was a scientist and a chemist at General Electric and had 7 patents to his name. He loved GE so much, 30 years in GE. He used to say, he was a philosopher. I never really understood that. But he would say, so many people are living in quiet desperation,
Yeah.
which is, I think, Thoreau or someone said it brilliantly. But I think that many, many people do live in quiet desperation in the attempt to do what is successful. And I have this house, I have these kids, what am I going to do, give this up? And I want to, I don't know if we're running out of time, I want to say this. What a lot of people, I have an article on the 5 biggest mistake career changers make, but one of
Yeah.
them is they think they have to chuck everything. Everything. Like, I'm a marketing director. I think I want to run a bed and breakfast. And there's a funny story that so many clients of mine fantasize. I call it the pendulum effect. When you're
Mm.
unhappy and in pain and where you are, you often just want to go like a pendulum all the
Yeah.
way to the
Go
other side of
away.
the world.
Yeah.
And that was me. I never want to put on a corporate suit. I want to be a therapist. The thing is, you can't really run away.
Mm.
You have to do the work to change yourself, or the same challenges that you had in the unhappy career are going to appear in the bed and breakfast that you're running. But I have said to people, you really think you want to start a bed and breakfast? I want you to interview 3 people, go stay at 3 different bed and breakfasts, and interview what is the life really like, the professional identity.
Yeah.
No one has come back and said, I want to run a bed and breakfast. They're like, what was I
Right.
thinking? But I really do love event planning or the culinary aspect of it or building a safe space for people. What you do want to do, if you're listening to this going, yeah, I'm miserable, but what am I going to do?
Mhm.
Don't chuck everything. Don't chuck everything. Think about what could be a pivot where you're using your great gifts and talents and your experience, and you're not throwing the baby and the bathwater out,
Yeah.
but
Great
you are
way.
leveraging it or refocusing it in a way that now some people really, I really did have to leave corporate life. It wasn't for me. It really wasn't for me. And I think I stayed because subconsciously my dad was so happy at GE. And I thought, well, that's how you have a happy life. Well, from day one, it wasn't right for me. Entrepreneurial life is right for me. So you do have to understand, where are you going to thrive best? And it may not be in a corporate setting, right? I'm sure you
Yeah.
see that, Frank, right? A
Oh,
lot
I
of the IT people really, they're entrepreneurs
many
or
al
should be.
and I do agree to kind of try to completely reinvent who you are is not good, not a good thing to do. Gradually move in a direction,
Right,
right?
right.
But leverage your strengths. You have, my God, all that learning, all that experience, and pivoting is the right answer.
Yeah.
It
And
really.
when I look back, here's another thing to leave people with. Steve Jobs said in his Stanford University commencement speech, which is on YouTube,
I
it's
love
beautiful.
that. Oh, I've
He
watched it many
I
times.
know.
Love
He talks about connecting the dots, and you can't do
that.
it now. It's hindsight. But the happiest people are leveraging those talents that have been with them since they were young. So, for me, it was writing ideas, helping people solve their issues by breaking them down, taking chaos and, whatever. Look back at who you were at your happiest when you were 16, 18. And some people say, "Oh, I was miserable when my parents wouldn't let me." Okay, all right.
Right.
But look at who
Find the
you
happy.
always have been and see how you can use those talents that really bring joy and meaning into your life. And I'm pretty sure that you could start doing that today. You don't necessarily have to chuck it all out.
Yeah.
Just start doing that today.
Well, they can find something they love and start it as a hobby too.
That's it.
And then
That's another thing. We don't have to get all our joy from work. It's like expecting your spouse to be everything. My best friend,
yeah.
my hot date, all of it wrapped into one. My intellectual stimulation. Work is work. I
Yeah.
love my work, and every day it's a joy. But there are elements of it. For instance, I'm a singer, and I have to have music in my life, but I do that as a hobby.
Mhm. Which is fantastic. Well, listen, I gotta tell you, just an absolutely fabulous interview. So much good advice for people
Thank you,
here. So
Frank.
many
Thank
people
you.
are suffering because they never did find out who they are.
Yeah,
And it's a shame, right? That
it
they
is a
have to
shame.
be one of those people, regrets of the dying, and have a
Yeah,
list of 5 things that they wish they had done. So I think everybody listening to this who's suffering in any way should really think about who you are, download the questionnaire, start pivoting slowly, get a hobby, just do something.
yeah,
And you won't know where that leads. The hobby may lead to meeting people, open up all these new avenues. Who knows? Anything could happen. You can meet people on the internet. You could start meetups on these things, meet interesting people. I mean, it's endless. So I think
it
people
is.
just have to just start moving, do something.
I love it. And I'm gonna leave you with this. Everybody is amazing. Everybody's like a fingerprint, so unique,
Yeah,
but amazing. Start to believe it. And if you really did believe it, what would you do differently if you could really believe that you have an important light to shine in this world? I
yeah.
hope that's helpful to everybody. Thank you for
Oh,
having me,
thank you so
Frank.
much for coming. It was absolutely great, and we'll have to have you back. You have so much to share.
Thank you. I'm ready when you are. Thank
Happy.
you. Bye,
Take care.
everybody.
Enjoy. Bye.